Rain tapped faintly against the wall-length glass windows of Julian Cross's penthouse, the cityscape beyond glittering like a scattered bag of diamonds. Inside, the room radiated muted luxury. Marble floors, art that cost more than apartments, and silence so precise it hummed. Julian stood by the fireplace, fingers wrapped around a glass of single malt. His assistant Lydia sat across the room, tablet in hand, reviewing the final guest list for the upcoming Cross Foundation gala. "Senator Brighton has confirmed," she said. "So have the DeMarcos and the Grahams. Still waiting on the Winfields. Elena." "Rousseau," Julian interrupted, his voice low and calm. "Add her." Lydia looked up sharply, stylus hovering in midair. "Elena Rousseau?" she echoed. Julian didn't turn around. He watched a reflection of his own face in the window, softened by rain. "Yes," he said. "Invite her." There was a pause, small but noticeable. Lydia, who had worked with Julian long enough to know what not to question, still hesitated. "I thought she hasn't been part of these events for 6 years, Julian finished, sipping his drink. "I know." He finally turned, a slight smile playing on his lips. "It'll be interesting, don't you think? A little spark of nostalgia, maybe even redemption." Lydia frowned. "Is that what this is about? Closure?" Julian laughed once, dry, unamused. "Hardly. Closure is for people who think pain is still negotiable." He walked over, glanced at the tablet screen and tapped the blank slot beneath a list of names carrying old money, board seats, and scandal-proof reputations. "Send." The invitation. "Make it elegant, something she can't ignore." Lydia nodded slowly, typing the name into the list. "Very well." As she gathered her things and moved toward the elevator, Julian spoke again, his tone different now. Flat. Colder. "She'll come. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and spread the word, and tell us where you're watching from." Lydia looked back, unsure if it was a question or a statement. Julian was already looking out the window again, the skyline blurred behind the glass. "She always liked a stage," he added quietly. When the elevator doors slid shut behind Lydia, silence reclaimed the room. Julian moved toward the sideboard, poured another drink with the care of a ritual. His hand lingered over the crystal decanter. He remembered the last time he saw Elena, the way she stared at him in that cold, white hallway, the hallway where she held something in her coat pocket, trembling but unspoken, where she asked, "What happens now?" and where he answered, "You'll figure it out." No goodbye, no follow-up, just the sharp echo of his shoes walking away. That had been the end, at least for him. Until now. Julian moved to the fireplace and stared at the flames, though his mind was elsewhere. In the past. In the shape of her voice. The way she looked when she smiled. No makeup, messy hair, like she didn't belong in his world but made it feel less empty. That was a long time ago. The gala was 10 days away. Plenty of time to let curiosity chew at her. He pictured her opening the envelope. Pausing. Hands hesitating at the seal. Would she laugh? Cry? Burn it? Didn't matter, she would come. If not for him, then for the spectacle, the attention, the closure he knew she hadn't earned. Julian's gaze shifted to the painting above the fireplace. A faceless figure, vibrant, but hollow. He smirked. Let her bring her dignity, her new life. Whatever little scraps she'd gathered since he left her behind, let her walk into his world again. He'd make sure she remembered who she was, and who she never could be. The dryer buzzed with a tired rattle, like it might give out any second. Elena sat cross-legged on the thin carpet of her studio apartment, folding clothes with rhythmic precision. One toddler shirt, one sock, one pair of miniature jeans. Her fingers moved faster than her thoughts. In the background, soft laughter echoed from a cartoon playing on a cracked tablet. The boys were still at daycare, and she had maybe 20 minutes before life got loud again. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps, followed by silence. She glanced, At the door, unsure. Bills didn't knock. Neighbors didn't either. Rising, she wiped her hands on her jeans and opened it slowly. No one stood in the hallway, just the faint scent of cigarettes and floor cleaner, and a crisp white envelope on the mat. Elena froze. No return address. Heavy cardstock. Her full name written in familiar, practiced handwriting. She shut the door, bolted it, and walked to the kitchen table. The envelope trembled slightly in her grip as she sat. Her thumb hovered at the seal. Then she opened it. Elegant serif font. Black and gold embossing. The words blurred for a second. "You are cordially invited to the Cross Foundation Gala." Her chest tightened. Julian. 6 years without a single word. 6 years since that night. Flashback. Winter. 6 years ago. The hallway outside his penthouse was colder than she remembered. Maybe it was her. Maybe it was the way he looked at her that night. Guarded, calculating. "I'm pregnant," she had whispered. Julian blinked. "Are you sure it's mine?" She had laughed, but there was no sound in it. "Don't do that," he sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Elena, you and I, this wasn't forever, you knew that." She pulled the test from her coat pocket. Still capped, still positive. "I thought I knew a lot of things." His face didn't change. His voice grew quieter, colder. "You'll figure it out." That was the last thing he said before turning and walking down the hall. Now the paper crinkled under Elena's tightening grip. She set the invitation down. Silence. For a long time, she just sat there, staring at it. The air around her was thick with ghosts, of what she thought they were, of who she thought she was. A future that never arrived. She stood up suddenly, went to the small dresser in the corner, and pulled open the bottom drawer. Beneath a sketch pad and old gallery flyers was a photograph, the only one she kept. Julian, her, and a sunset behind them. Taken 2 weeks before everything changed. She hadn't looked at it in years. Her phone buzzed, a message from the daycare. "The boys are finishing snack. Should we let them play until pickup?" She stared at the screen. Then, slowly, she typed back, "Yes, give them a few more minutes." Her reflection stared back from the window. Not the girl from the photo, not the woman Julian left. She picked up the invitation again. It was never about forgiveness. Not anymore. She opened her contact list, scrolled down, and tapped a name. A soft male voice answered on the second ring. "Elena?" She didn't hesitate. "We're going," she said, voice steady. "It's time." She never remembered leaving the building, only the sound of her heels echoing in the hallway, the sting in her throat, and the look on Julian's face as he turned his back. As if she were just another meeting he was done with. Elena Rousseau, once the rising star of the New York art world, walked out of Julian Cross's penthouse, carrying more than a broken heart. She was carrying life. But no, one would know that part. Not yet. The city that had once applauded her, vibrant exhibits, write-ups in glossy magazines, front row seats beside Julian at elite functions, now seemed to recoil. Her name vanished from gallery windows. Invitations stopped coming. Even the curator who'd once begged her for exclusivity now avoided her gaze at coffee shops, and it didn't take long for the whispers to start. She got too emotional. He funded her career. She should have known better. He left because she was unstable. They didn't ask what he'd done. No one ever asked him anything. Julian didn't make statements he didn't have to. Power, it turned out, was a silence that crushed louder truths. Her studio lease ended abruptly. She sold most of her paintings online under a pseudonym just to afford prenatal vitamins. One by one, friends evaporated, some politely, others cruelly. Even her parents, already distant, offered only tight-lipped disappointment over the phone. "You're keeping it?" her mother had asked. "Them," Elena had replied softly. "Twins." Her father hung up without a word. By the third trimester, she was alone in a walk-up studio in Queens, stitching her life together with duct tape, thrift store baby bottles, and the kind of strength you only find when no one is coming to save you. At night, she drew, not to sell, to survive. She poured every ounce of pain, fear, and fury onto the page. One drawing stayed taped to the wall beside her mattress. A faceless man with a crown, holding a puppet with a heart stitched to its chest. She named it Legacy, but legacy wasn't what woke her at 3 a.m. to soothe one screaming infant, while the other burned with fever. Legacy didn't help her work double shifts as a waitress with cracked fingers and sore ankles. Legacy didn't hold her while she cried in the shower so the boys wouldn't hear. No, that was something else, something quieter. Fiercer. Love. Despite everything, they smiled at her, called her mama before anything else, hugged her knees when she walked through the door, asked for bedtime stories about a magic lion who beat the mean king. She gave them everything, even the version of the world she no longer believed in, because if they grew up thinking they were born from pain, they'd carry that pain forever. So she painted them a different origin, but the truth still lived beneath it. Julian had erased her, and the world let him. She used to wonder in those early years if she should have begged, pleaded. Maybe that voicemail she left, the one where her voice cracked as she said, "I don't want anything, just tell me what you want me to do." Maybe that was too much, but over time her shame stopped being a weight, it became armor, and now, with his invitation in her hand, the cold irony made her smile. He didn't know she survived. He definitely didn't know how. He thought she was a ghost from his past, a loose thread to be tied, a name to parade in pity or power. He thought she'd come to be embarrassed, but he didn't understand the truth. She wasn't the same girl who stood in that hallway 6 years ago. That girl died the night he broke her. The woman he would meet at the gala, she was forged in fire, and she wasn't coming alone. The boutique smelled of jasmine and velvet. Elena ran her fingers along the row of evening gowns, letting the silks and satins whisper against her skin. It had been years since she stood beneath such lighting, soft gold designed to flatter the wealthy and disguise hesitation. But she wasn't here to feel beautiful. She was here to be remembered. A saleswoman approached, eyes scanning her from head to toe with practiced precision. "Are you shopping for an event?" "Yes," Elena said. "Something black, clean lines. I want them to notice, but not understand why." The woman blinked, but nodded, leading her to a side section. Elena followed, her boots muffled against the carpet. She kept her gaze high. She remembered to walk like someone who belonged. While the saleswoman gathered a few options, Elena stepped aside and opened her phone. A photo of the twins filled her screen, both of them tangled in their superhero bedsheets, grinning with blueberry-stained teeth. Her stomach fluttered. She had never introduced them to that side of her past. But it was time. A bell rang near the entrance. "Elena?" called a voice, familiar, soft, male. She turned to see Nate standing by the children's tuxedo rack, holding up 2 tiny black jackets. "I think these are the right size," he said. "Double-checked with the measurements you sent." She smiled, walking over to him. Perfect. Nate had been the boys' music teacher at the community center. Quiet, gentle, never asked questions she wasn't ready to answer. Over the years, he'd become more than a friend, but they both understood there were corners of her past she kept locked away, until now. "They're going to look like little spies," he grinned. "They'll look like a statement," Elena corrected. She examined the tuxedos carefully, straightening the lapels. The jackets were simple, sharp, just enough for people to wonder whose children they were, just enough to make him stop smiling. "I'm still not sure I get it," Nate said carefully. "You're bringing them to that gala in front of him?" Elena didn't look up. "They deserve to be seen," she said, "not hidden like a mistake, and he deserves to know that silence doesn't erase consequence." There was a long pause. Finally, Nate nodded. "Then I'll be right there, just in case." Her fingers curled tighter around the fabric. She met his eyes. "I know." Later, at home, she laid the tuxedos on the bed. The twins climbed up, bouncing around them. "Are we going to a wedding?" one asked. "No," Elena laughed, brushing back a curl. "It's a party." "Will Daddy be there?" the other asked, quieter. Elena hesitated. She reached out, pulled both boys close, kissed the tops of their heads. "He won't know yet," she whispered. "But he will." They giggled, not understanding but feeling something in her voice. A change, a shift. And outside, the city lights blinked on like spotlights on a stage. The chandeliers above the ballroom glittered like frozen fireworks. Waiters in black waistcoats wove silently through the crowd, balancing trays of champagne and canapes. A string quartet played something elegant and forgettable near the marble staircase. Julian Cross stood at the center of it all, tailored navy tux, cufflinks glinting, every smile calculated. He was shaking hands, leaning in for laughs, charming billionaires, senators, and celebrities with ease. Every few minutes, someone raised a glass to him. His foundation had just closed a $30 million expansion grant for at-risk youth programs. The headlines tomorrow would praise his philanthropy, his poise, his legacy. Everything was exactly as he'd planned, except her. Julian glanced toward the entrance again. Nothing. She might not come, Lydia murmured beside him, handing him a fresh drink. He said nothing, but something flickered in his jaw. "Perhaps that's for the best," Lydia added. Julian didn't answer. He hated unclosed loops. But as the clock struck 8:21, the main doors swung open, and silence fell. It wasn't immediate. It rippled, like a shift in air pressure before a storm. She stepped inside slowly, shoulders back, chin lifted, Elena Rousseau in a midnight black dress that shimmered like oil under the chandeliers. Her curls were pinned up, exposing the long line of her neck and a single silver earring that caught the light. But it wasn't just her. On either side of her walked two identical boys in perfectly tailored tuxedos, small hands gripping hers, eyes wide but calm. The murmur started instantly. "Who is that? Is that Elena? And the children, are they hers?" Julian froze. Elena's gaze swept across the room like a lighthouse beam. She saw the stairs, felt the hush settle into the walls. She walked forward slowly, gracefully, with the quiet command of someone who had once been ignored and would never be again. The twins stuck close, their steps in sync. She had rehearsed this with them the night before, turned it into a game. We walk tall, we don't run, and we don't let go of each other. And they hadn't. She moved through the crowd like smoke untouched. When she finally reached Julian, the music behind them seemed to fade into white noise. He blinked once. "Elena," he said, voice unreadable. Her expression didn't change. "Mr. Cross," she replied coolly, as if she'd never tasted his name on her tongue in 1,000 midnight memories. Julian glanced down at the boys, the identical cheekbones, the hazel eyes. His throat tightened before he could stop it. She didn't give him a chance to speak. "These are my sons," she said simply, her tone perfectly even. "Nico and Leon." A pause. Then, deliberately, "They're 6. The math struck like thunder behind his eyes. Before he could respond, before he could form a lie or a deflection, Elena turned away. "We won't stay long," she added over her shoulder. "Just long enough to be seen." She led the boys toward the gallery wing of the ballroom, where portraits of donors lined the wall. The twins stared wide-eyed at the paintings, unaware of the social earthquake they'd just walked into. Julian remained still. Around him, voices swirled, half whispers, half hysteria, but he didn't move. He couldn't. Because in that one moment, his past had walked in, not to haunt him, but to humiliate him. And she had smiled while doing it. The laughter, the glasses clinking, the orchestra, all of it dissolved into white noise behind him. Julian moved through the ballroom with purpose, cutting through guests who stepped aside instinctively. His heart beat harder than it had in years. Rage sharpened his focus, but beneath it pulsed something worse, uncertainty. He found her near the gallery wall, pretending to study a painting of a ship in storm. The twins stood a few feet away, munching politely on hors d'oeuvres, guarded by a familiar man, Nate. Julian barely acknowledged him. "Elena," he hissed. Now. She turned slowly, that same maddening calm etched across her face. The boys looked up. She gave them a reassuring nod. Julian led her down a narrow corridor behind the kitchen, dimly lit, away from the crowd. A hallway reserved for staff, not ghosts. Once alone, he whirled to face her. What the hell was that? She raised a brow. A party. You invited me, remember? You brought children here, my goddamn... He stopped himself, suddenly unsure. Elena tilted her head. Your goddamn what, Julian? He stared at her. You never told me. Her eyes narrowed. Didn't I? He blinked. She stepped closer. I left you a voicemail the week I found out. I remember exactly what I said. I told you I wasn't asking for anything. Just wanted to know if you would show up. You didn't. That never happened, he said. But his voice faltered. She leaned in, whispering now. Or maybe you just deleted it. Like everything else. He swallowed hard. I thought we were over. I thought you understood that. You told me I was a mistake, she said flatly. I was angry. You blindsided me. No, she said. You were careful. You were cold. You told me to figure it out and then watched me disappear. Julian pressed a hand to his forehead, pacing 2 steps before turning back. Why now? He demanded. Why bring them here? In front of investors, board members? Because this is where the lie lives, she said. Right under chandeliers and catered lies. You built a life that erased me. I didn't erase you, he snapped. You vanished. I survived, she corrected. And I raised them alone, while you gave TED Talks about building legacy. There was a silence so thick it felt like fog. Julian looked toward the ballroom doors, then back at her. I didn't know, he said again, this time quietly. And it almost sounded real. But you didn't ask, Elena replied. You never wondered, not even once. His expression cracked. Just a flicker, quickly smoothed over. You made your point, he said coldly. But this, parading them here, it's a stunt. And it's cruel. They wanted to meet their father, she said. And now they've seen him. A man who doesn't flinch at betrayal but panics at truth. Julian stepped closer, lowering his voice to a venomous whisper. You're doing this for attention. She met his gaze without blinking. You're wrong. I'm doing this for balance. He scoffed. What do you want, Elena? Money? Recognition? An apology? She smiled. That same cold, beautiful smile that had just undressed his entire empire in a single look. I want you to remember what you said to me that night in the hallway. He frowned. You said, you're a mistake I don't need. Julian's throat tightened. Elena leaned in, her voice low and lethal. So I agreed. I became someone you couldn't control. Someone you'd never expect. A mistake that multiplied into 2 miracles. He opened his mouth, but she was already walking away, heels silent against the marble floor. Julian stood alone, in the dark hallway, his reflection warped in the stainless steel panel beside him. And for the first time in years, he wasn't sure who he saw. Julian waited until the gala's final speech wrapped. Applause echoed through the ballroom as donors rose from their seats, clinking glasses and making promises they'd forget by morning. Elena stood near the far wall, watching the twins nibble at dessert. Nate was chatting with another guest, always, close but never intrusive. Julian approached her with the same practiced calm he used in negotiations. Elena, he said, voice low. Come with me. She didn't hesitate, not this time. He led her to a side room, a smaller, dimly lit parlor lined with wine bottles and antique leather chairs. A place where secrets were exchanged, not spilled. Julian shut the door. Let's be honest now, he said, removing an envelope from his jacket. He laid it on the table between them like a playing card. She didn't look down. Whatever this is, he continued, it doesn't have to get louder. You've made your point. You got your entrance. You rattled the cages. But there are consequences. For you. And for them. For them, Elena echoed, icy. I'm offering security, he said. For the boys, a trust, a home if anything ever happens to you, a name even if you want it, all clean, quiet. Elena's fingers curled around, the back of the chair steadying herself. Do you hear yourself? She asked softly. I'm trying to be reasonable, Julian said. They don't need to suffer for our history. She gave a bitter laugh. History? That's what you call it? Julian's jaw tightened. I'm giving you a way out. And what are you buying in return, she asked. Silence, dignity, fatherhood minus the responsibility? He didn't answer. That was his answer. Flashback. 6 years ago. It was snowing the night she told him. Big, quiet flakes swirling outside the window of his penthouse as she sat on the edge of the leather sofa. I'm keeping them, she said. Julian stood across the room, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Both? She blinked. What? He stepped closer. You have options, I can help. Make this easier. She stared at him, horror blooming in her chest. You're telling me to get rid of them. I'm telling you this will ruin your career, ours, everything. She had whispered then, as if saying it too loudly would break her. They're not a problem. They're mine. She left that night, called him once, left a message that bled. I don't want anything, just say something, anything. The voicemail was never returned. Back in the present, Elena slowly reached for the envelope. She opened it without a word. Stacks of crisp bills stared back at her, untraceable, generous, and insulting. She slid the envelope back across the table. I'm not here for revenge, Julian, she said. I'm here for clarity. He frowned. What does that mean? It means I don't want your money. I want your reputation to remember what you tried to bury. Julian stood still. For years, she continued, I thought maybe I should have fought harder, called again, written, begged. She looked up at him, her voice steady. But now I know. Some things aren't worth chasing. Some people only understand truth when it's dressed in consequence. Julian's face darkened. You think the world will turn on me over this? She stepped toward him, just once. No, she said. I think you will turn on yourself. That's always been your specialty. She walked out of the room without another glance, leaving the envelope untouched and the man behind it smaller than he'd ever looked. She hadn't noticed him. Neither had Julian. But in the adjacent lounge, separated by a thin wall, velvet drapes, and nothing more, a man with a press badge tucked discreetly in his jacket sat sipping whiskey he couldn't afford. Ethan Merrick wasn't officially on the guest list. He'd slipped in with a photography team, feigning credentials and flashing a fake smile. It wasn't his first infiltration, but tonight he hadn't expected anything more than staged photos and inflated speeches. Until the whispering started behind the curtain. He froze mid-sip when he caught the words, trust fund, the boys, and you told me to get rid of them. Ethan leaned in. Every reporter instinct screamed record. His phone was already rolling. He didn't move, didn't blink, just listened. By the time Elena walked out and Julian stayed behind, staring at money he couldn't spend fast enough, Ethan already knew he had something nuclear. He left the gala unnoticed, a ghost among the powerful. By 6 a.m. the next morning, the article hit the web. Billionaire disowns twins after gala. Bombshell private showdown between Julian Cross and artist Elena Rousseau exposes dark past. The subheading was worse. Secret twins, silent millions, and a voicemail, never answered, screens, lit up across social media like wildfire catching dry leaves. Within an hour, hashtags trended. Julian Cross exposed, our Galagate, Elena and the twins. Comments poured in. She raised 2 boys alone and he tried to buy her silence? He's finished. Done. Imagine being erased by someone with that much power. Respect. To Elena. Talk shows scrambled to book her. Podcast hosts emailed her agents, old and new. Reporters flooded her inbox with interview offers. But Elena? She said nothing. She brewed coffee in the same chipped mug. fed the boys their cereal with banana slices shaped like stars, took them to school, kissed their foreheads, and told them to be kind. She didn't refresh the news, didn't post. Silence had once been a punishment. Now it was her power. Julian, on the other hand, couldn't stop refreshing. His PR team called an emergency meeting by noon. The foundation's board issued a statement distancing itself. 2 major sponsors quietly pulled funding. One of his VC deals stalled. Shareholders got nervous. It wasn't just about the story, it was about optics. The photos from the gala were damning. Elena, radiant, the boys, smiling. Julian, pale and tight-lipped in the background. He tried to craft a counter-narrative, leaked claims about miscommunication and deep regret. But the public wasn't buying. For the first time in a decade, Julian Cross wasn't controlling the conversation. And Elena? She picked up the boys from school that afternoon. They ran to her, laughing, their backpacks bouncing. One handed her a folded piece of paper, a crayon drawing of her holding 2 stick-figure hands. "I told my class you're famous now," he said proudly. She smiled, eyes misting. Not famous, she thought, just finally seen. The courthouse smelled like old paper, and cleaner. The kind of place where reputations weren't sculpted but shattered. Julian sat stiffly beside his legal team, every inch of his tailored suit pressed and perfect. But his hands were restless in his lap, fingers twitching with every scrape of a chair or cough in the gallery. Across the room, Elena adjusted the hem of her navy blazer and gave a small smile to Nate, seated behind her. She didn't look at Julian. She didn't need to anymore. The lawsuit had come swiftly after the article. Julian claimed defamation, willful misrepresentation, emotional distress. But Elena responded with a suit of her own: paternity confirmation, unpaid child support, and willful concealment of parental obligation. Now both cases had been merged, and the world was watching. Case number 3087, the clerk called out. Cross versus Russo. The judge, a woman with steely eyes and zero tolerance for theatrics, nodded for the opening statements to begin. Julian's attorney rose first, voice calm, calculated. "My client," he said, "is a man of stature and service, a philanthropist, a victim of a deeply personal vendetta made public by an opportunistic former partner." He gestured toward Elena. She withheld the alleged existence of children for 6 years. Now, conveniently, she appears at a high-profile event with twins. Twins my client had no verified knowledge of. The room buzzed, but the judge's gavel silenced it instantly. When it was Elena's lawyer's turn, the tone shifted. "Elena Russo is not seeking revenge," she said. "She's seeking accountability, and the facts will show that Mr. Cross was made aware of her pregnancy, then used his wealth to suppress, ignore, and erase that truth." Then the evidence began. First, a voicemail. Recovered from Elena's old prepaid phone, played aloud in court. "I'm not asking for anything. Just, please call me back." Julian's jaw tensed. Next came printed emails from Julian's assistant at the time. Short threads, but enough to suggest he'd been informed of the pregnancy. His team had advised against engagement. One subject. Line read, "We need this to disappear." Julian shifted in his seat. Then came the documents. Elena's hospital records, confirming a twin pregnancy, signed discharge summaries, noting no known partner present. A psychiatrist's note describing the trauma of abandonment, but the final blow came from a man no one expected. Julian's former legal aide, subpoenaed, nervous, sweating under oath. "I was asked to draft a non-disclosure agreement in 2017, he said, voice barely above a whisper. It offered Elena a financial settlement if she agreed to terminate the pregnancy and have no future contact." "Did she sign it?" the judge asked. "No," he replied. "She never even saw it. It was prepared, then shelved. Mr. Cross said it was a backup plan, just in case." Julian stared straight ahead, unmoving. The courtroom fell heavy with silence. Then came the DNA results. Delivered in a manila envelope, a match with 99.99% certainty. The judge glanced at Julian. "Do you contest paternity at this time?" Julian inhaled slowly. "No, Your Honor." Gasps rippled. Cameras clicked outside the windows. Elena didn't flinch. She simply folded her hands in her lap, calm beneath the weight of everything she'd carried for years. By the time recess was called, the gallery was abuzz. Julian's reputation wasn't just wounded, it was bleeding out in real time. And Elena? She walked out of that courtroom with her head high. Not because she'd won a case, but because truth had been spoken. Finally. Publicly. Permanently. The lies had unraveled, and in the cold light of the courtroom, the truth had glowed brighter than ever. Julian's penthouse was silent now. Not the curated kind of quiet that came with wealth, but a hollow stillness born from absence. No meetings, no staff, no calls. His inbox had turned cold. 3 sponsors pulled out the week after the trial verdict. 2 more froze funding indefinitely. His name was dropped from a tech board he once chaired. The Cross Foundation's public page replaced his image, with a grayscale logo and a statement, "Under leadership review." He had built his life on order, precision, control. Now everything slipped through his fingers like water. The worst part wasn't the headlines, it was the footage. He watched it again, and again. Security cam feed from the gala. Elena entering, dressed in black like justice with a pulse. Her sons flanking her, unaware they were shattering legacies with each step. Then the look on his own face, frozen, exposed, powerless. Julian leaned back on the leather sofa, loosening his tie. The once grand skyline outside looked like a painting in someone else's house. Unreachable. On the coffee table sat unopened letters, legal updates, investor statements. But one envelope stood out. Plain, cream-colored, no sender listed. Just his name. He stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single index card, 3 words. Handwritten. I was wrong. No signature, no return address. But he didn't need one. It was her handwriting. Unmistakable. Elegant, sparse. He turned the card over. Blank. For a second, something in him stirred. Something like regret, but colder. He pressed the card to his lips, then tossed it aside like it burned. Across the city, Elena stood in her kitchen, slicing apples for the twins. Lunchboxes. Light filtered through the window, dancing across the floor in warm rectangles. She didn't wait for his reply. She never had. Nate sat at the table, reviewing a flyer from a local arts fundraiser. They want you to speak. Theme is art as reclamation. You'd be perfect. Elena smiled faintly. We'll see. She reached into her bag and pulled out a sketch pad. A new one. Clean pages. She wrote a single title across the front. Legacy, Rewritten. Then she glanced out the window, toward the city that once tried to swallow her whole. Julian could keep his empire. She had truth now, and that wasn't something he could silence, sell, or sue into submission. Up in the penthouse, Julian stared out at the same skyline, but his reflection in the window looked smaller now. Diminished. He picked up the card again, turned it over. Still blank, still final. The gallery smelled of fresh paint and quiet reverence. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, casting long beams across the polished concrete floor. Along the white walls hung Elena Rousseau's first solo exhibit in nearly 7 years. Inheritance. Each canvas radiated with layered emotion, muted tones erupting into color, delicate brushwork beneath bold strokes. A faceless man stretched toward a crown that melted in his grip. A woman cloaked in wildfire stood between 2 children, her shadow stretching larger than the frame allowed. Another painting, smaller, more intimate, showed 2 silhouettes, twin boys holding hands, looking out at a horizon that bled gold. Visitors moved slowly from piece to piece, whispering as they went. "It's about power," someone murmured. "No," another replied. "It's about what's left behind." "Do you think those are her sons?" Elena stood outside the entrance, watching through the glass. She didn't want to be inside for the noise, the praise, or the awkward congratulations from people who once ghosted her emails. She preferred the sidewalk, the fresh air, the sound of sneakers slapping pavement. "Mom!" Nico shouted, racing down the block. Leon followed close behind, laughter echoing between buildings. Elena smiled, stepping aside as they barreled into her legs. "Did they see our painting?" Leon asked, catching his breath. "They're still looking," she said, brushing a leaf from his curls. "But I think they feel it." Nate approached from the corner, holding coffees. "You're officially sold out," he said, handing her a cup. "Some collector in Berlin bought the wildfire piece." Elena took a sip, eyes on the gallery. "Good. Let her burn somewhere new." They stood in silence for a moment. "You sure? You don't want to go inside?" Nate asked. "This is your night." Elena shook her head. "It's not mine anymore. It belongs to them." She nodded toward the gallery, not just at the crowd, but at her work, the parts of her that had once been buried under shame, fear, and silence. Now they were framed in light. And somewhere, miles away in a penthouse that didn't feel like home, Julian would see headlines about her comeback. He'd scroll through photos of her paintings, of her smiling with the twins outside the gallery. He'd recognize his absence in every frame, and he'd know this story didn't need his ending. As the crowd inside leaned in to read her artist's statement, they would find only a single line typed beneath the title Inheritance. "We are not what is left to us. We are what we choose to carry forward." Elena turned to her sons, one hand on each shoulder. "Ready?" "Where are we going now?" Nico asked. "Somewhere with fries," she said. They whooped with joy and took off running. She followed, laughing, not chasing, not pulling, just walking behind two boys who had no idea they were once supposed to disappear. And in the distance, the last of the afternoon sun broke fully through the clouds.